Greetings from the lovely state of Alabama. I'm on the Gulf Coast doing a job. I like Alabama. It kind of reminds me of what the Carolinas used to be like until it was all taken over by carpetbaggers. You go to South Carolina now, and it's like you're liable to get unsweetened iced tea. It doesn't feel like you're in the South or anything anymore because it's all these assholes that move in from up north. Completely changed the culture and the feel of everything. That hasn't really happened in Alabama yet. But So I was flying out on Friday, and I was at the airport. I ended up getting a phone call from that I was kind of expecting. So this program I volunteer for, Vets Helping Vets, it's one of the ways that I try to force myself into doing things that I'm not comfortable with doing, which is interacting with people other than my wife and my child. I tend to really struggle with this. Mainly because every fiber of my being wants me to just isolate and just not have human interactions. It makes me very uncomfortable. So I recognize this is a problem, and this is one of the reasons why I go to therapy and shit. And of course, one of the things that I do is I force myself to interact with people. So when I talk about like volunteering at my homeless shelter, my local one, and I talk about volunteering with veterans, I don't do it for them, and I don't do it because I like it. I do it because it forces me to stay in practice with trying to pretend like I give a shit when interacting with people. And it's very tiresome, and it's not something I like to do. But it's just part of being an adult, and I know my wife appreciates that I do this. Because if I only interacted with people other than my wife and my son and interacted with people through the course of my work, my human interaction skills go to shit. Um, so I volunteer, and usually what ends up happening is I interact with people over the phone, and when it comes to this veteran crap, and or on like Teams meetings or whatever online chat thing I could try to get the veteran in question to use. Most of the people I work with are just young folks that have questions about going to college and stuff. Some of them are more difficult to deal with. Some of them have never really been able to reach on any kind of level. And I generally take the harder cases because, unlike a normal human being, there's really nothing you can say or do to elicit a response out of me. And for some of these fuck ups, this is how they protect themselves from having to engage in self reflection and modifying their own behavior and actions. So, like, they'll just lash out by saying threatening shit or off the wall shit, try to get under your skin. That doesn't really work with me. It never really has. Um, this is part of the reasons why I tend to very unnerve people when we're having face-to-face interaction and talking because I don't respond to things very well. I tend not to get jokes and so on. And of course, my sense of humor tends to unnerve people because I don't want to say I'm not very good with empathy. I lack it. Lack it completely. So anyway, I knew this phone call was coming, and it was from the young lady that's the coordinator for the Vets Helping Vet program. That's not what it's called, but that's basically what it is. And of course, this wasn't from her office number. This was from her personal cell phone number. And she wanted to apologize to me, and if I could try to get word out to everybody over what happened. And of course, like any federal employee, since she had less than 6 months working with the VA, and I mean, all she was doing was coordinating us and processing veterans who have just entered the system, who filled out a questionnaire, asking about wanting to go to college, and so on. She had just taken over for somebody that had just retired. So since she had less than 6 months, of course, she got liquidated because that's the thing we're doing right now is we're getting rid of government workers. You know, that's what Americans voted for. They want benefits slashed. I firmly expect to basically lose all my medical benefits and shit. So she was just like, "Yeah, I'm really sorry. Like, I kind of got no notice about it. It was sort of like an automated email. I got locked out of the system. So, you know, I was like, well, I'm guessing they're shutting down the whole thing." She goes, "I think that's what's happening." She's like, "Because we don't have anybody to take my position." So she's like, "I'm really sorry about this." I'm like, "No, this is fine. You know, that's fine by me." She's like, "But the way they're kind of doing this was so disorganized. It was so quick." She's like, "I couldn't really even tell anybody." And she's like, "You're basically one of two people I've gotten a hold of." She's like, "Because again, I'm locked out of the system." She's like, "And I remember your cell phone number." So, because again, I would tend to get the guys that were super aggressive, really, really struggling with drugs and alcoholism and stuff. So we ended up interacting probably way more than she did with any other volunteer in the short period of time that she was working for the VA. So I started calling the people that I work with, letting them know, like, hey, they're shutting down this program. And some of the folks obviously were very, very disappointed. And I did feel for I mean, at least that's what you're supposed to say, for the folks that were like going into college and stuff, and they're a little nervous about it. And so if they weren't pains in my asses, I told them like, well, this is my cell phone number, so feel free to get a hold of me. There's no reason why if you have a question or whatever, I can't try to help you out. There was one guy though, I'm going to call him Greg, that I was not looking forward to uh, dealing with him. Uh, It's one thing, it's a pain in the ass to get a hold of Greg. It takes 4 or 5 attempts always. Greg's notorious for scheduling like online time with me on like a Teams chat or whatever, and just fucking blows me off or completely forgets kind of thing. Um, Greg's a full-fledged I'm honestly surprised in the 6 years or so that I've worked with him that Greg is still alive. Um, he looks like shit. He sounds like shit. I suspect that he is in a perpetual state of either going through severe alcohol withdrawal every morning, and then usually by 10 o'clock in the morning, he's limped over to his local gas station and bought a 30-pack of beer, and he just slams that. Um, and that's basically his day. You know, I'm not even sure if he really gets any kind of food in him. I mean, he's drinking to the point where like his teeth are starting to fall out, and he gets tremors real bad and so on. So I finally get a hold of Greg, and the other reason I get really annoyed dealing with Greg is he's one of the guys that I have to talk to him via a computer screen. I have to try to read his lips because with my hearing problems and stuff, and the way he slurs his shit, it's very, very hard for me to figure out what the fuck he's saying just over the phone. Uh, Even with my hearing surgery and my hearing aids, it's hit or miss on. I usually have to try, even if I could see him, I'm usually trying to pick up like every third word and then trying to string it together. And of course, I don't know how many times he has started a meeting not realizing that like he is shirtless. I'm hoping he's wearing at least underwear. I can never really tell. I don't want to just say, "Hey, are you wearing clothes?" and then have him stand up and I get to see his junk as he's trying to fumble around. Like he's the kind of I've had meetings with him where he didn't realize he was fucking muted, and it probably went smoother. um, so so Greg's a real fucking train wreck. So he finally just got a hold of me. It's like 10 o'clock where I'm at, and Greg is lit. He's out of it, and it takes me a while for me to be able to explain to him. It probably took about 2 or 3 attempts to get him to understand that the VA is shutting down this volunteer program, and since they're doing that, I'm not I'm not volunteering with him anymore. And he's why they're doing that, and I was like, well, the young lady, we'll say her name's Julia. I was like, Julia, right? No, like she's the lady that coordinates all of us. She's been fired. What the fuck does she do? I was like, well, she got hired like 4.5 months ago or 5 months ago. And so, the new president, they're liquidating positions of people that have only been with the government for 6 months or less. They're just getting a blanket pink slip and they're all getting fired. Well, that's fucking Obama. And it's like, you mean Trump, man? Oh, don't push this on him. And I was like, all right, dude. I'm not getting into a political argument or anything with you. I'm just, are you aware what year it is? Like, I actually drove this guy for him to vote. I actually picked him up from the trailer park he lives in. I don't normally do that for people, but Greg's one of those people that I'm afraid of him trying to like drink and drive or even try to like utilize public transportation. He's that much of a train wreck. And oh, I remember he got in on me because I wouldn't tell him who I voted for because I don't believe in sharing that shit. And of course, Greg, any that whole day was just wouldn't shut up about how we're finally getting rid of entitlements and stuff, and we're gonna, trim the fat. And it's like, okay, Greg, you do realize that you were completely subsisting on government aid at this point. But I was like, well, look, dude, it doesn't matter. The program's going away, and it's over. So, and then Greg proceeds to go off on this long um, swear word laden rant at me about how that's the problem with you kids these days. You care more about having all your fuck agendas and shit than supporting veterans, and that we don't know the first thing about commitment and service and all this crap. And this is kind of a prime example of how drunk or how wet brained I should say Greg is. Where I've got to have at least 15 years on Greg. I'm older than him by 15 years, I suspect. Greg only managed to do, I want to say, around 14 months in the Navy before he got medically separated for alcoholism. And he's just been in this perpetual state of just drinking every day since. It's a really pathetic situation. And of course, you can't get him to go to AA. You can't get him to go into any kind of drug treatment. Getting him to just go to medical appointments and shit is difficult. Mainly because we've had a situation where like the VA would send over a driver to pick him up, and like Greg has either A been too passed out drunk to be able to answer the door, or B it'd be a situation where the driver would just refuse to take him because he was just getting belligerent and aggressive and threatening kind of thing. It's just funny for him to like start ranting at me about like I don't know anything about commitment or service or whatever. It's like motherfucker, I did like practically 6 times or whatever the amount of time that you did. um, I do think there's a lot of parallels between me and Greg. What I mean by that, it's not just we're both alcoholics. I'm somebody that doesn't drink, but I know I'm an alcoholic. whereas Greg is a full-fledged practicing alcoholic. The other thing is, I firmly believe that all of Greg's issues have nothing to do with the Navy. Uh, Similar to me, I don't believe any of my issues are really down to what I saw in Afghanistan and what I experienced getting blown up. I really don't. I was already fucking messed up by the time I was like 14 when I got pulled out of my family home. Um, it's the whole reason why I have antisocial personality disorder. That wasn't caused by the military. That was caused by my parents and their junky friends and shit. You can only beat a kid on a regular basis and sexually abuse them for so long before they get weird. And this is also part of the things that I know I make people uncomfortable about because I could talk to people about what I went through and the abuse, and I don't get emotional. Like like a lot of people I think imagine that I hate my parents and I want to kill them, and I don't feel any like it doesn't matter to me. I just that's what's wrong with me. And I think Greg probably has a lot of similarities to me. I bet you Greg's childhood was very, very brutal. But unlike Greg, I'm sorry, Greg's unlike me, where he's not what is commonly known as a sociopath. Greg still has emotions and shit. And the way Greg deals with this is just he gets obliterated every fucking day. So I'm trying to explain to him like, well, you ranting at me doesn't fix anything. Pro tip for any of you out there: like, if you find your benefits or services cut off, there's no point in screaming at the person that's explaining this to you. It's not like it's their call. So finally, Greg's like, so who are they going to get to replace her? I was like, there's no one to replace her, dude. Like, they're just doing away with this because it's a position that just doesn't exist anymore. So there's nobody to coordinate the volunteers. And he said, well, why don't you do it? Because I have a job, Greg. I have a family. I have other responsibilities. I cannot take on a full-time job with the VA for no pay. I'm not doing that. So it's over. You need to start taking care of yourself. I didn't want to like lay it on thick and just point out to him. I was like, well, what do you really care, dude? Because you're not fucking getting any better. You've been drinking yourself to death for like the last 5 or 6 years. And frankly, it's a miracle that you're. I don't know how he's still alive. I'll be honest with you. Like the way he drinks and shit, like he's to the point where I see him all the time and he's covered in bruises and shit. And I don't think it's necessarily that he's falling over. I think he's to the point that he's got congestive heart failure from drinking, and that tends to be one of the reasons why you start to bloat up and stuff, and you tend to start being able to bruise really fucking easily. So Greg is what I would have been if I didn't listen to my wife and my boss when they had the intervention with me in the hospital. Like I would be Greg if I was still fucking drinking, because I wouldn't have been able to hold it together, and I would have just kept drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking until eventually I was like Greg, a homeless or not homeless, but living in like a trailer shithole trailer park, getting obliterated every single fucking day. I don't know how you fix someone like Greg. Um, People like Greg cost society a lot of money. We don't institutionalize people like Greg anymore because that in itself is incredibly expensive. I know a lot of people bitch and moan about crazy homeless people that are allowed to live on subways and shit. Well, we closed down those institutions for two reasons. One, they were brutally expensive, and two, those institutions oftentimes were so underfunded that they tended to become just institutions where you chain people to walls and shit and dope them up or half starve them and shit. I mean, I think people tend to forget about all the scandals that came out in like the 80s about how bad these institutions got. I remember when I want to say it was around 9 years old. My father ended up getting arrested for, I don't even remember what. He's been arrested so many fucking times. I can't keep track of it. It's like my siblings. I don't keep track of my siblings, whether they're in prison or not. But I remember my father, he basically, to get out of a criminal charge, ended up getting institutionalized instead for, I think, for his alcohol. Like, so somehow he was able to convince them that he was like not liable to mental illness or whatever. And my dad ended up doing, I want to say, around 7 or 8 months in a mental hospital in Maryland. And my dad didn't come back out of that very, very well. I don't know what happened to him inside. It seemed to have fucked him up way more than any of the time he ever did in jail. And so, if you want to go to that, it's going to be expensive and it's going to probably lead to other unintended consequences. Again, I will say this, though, it's probably cheaper to do that than to, because than do what we're currently doing, which is just leaving homeless people out in the street and shit, because that in itself ends up costing an ungodly amount of money. But Greg's a prime example of, though, these are the kind of people that society, all societies, this is not just the US. Like, there are homeless people in Japan. Like, it's just people are in denial about it. And they all cost a lot of money because oftentimes these are people that will not accept help or treatment or services. So we don't really have a way to force people into treatment and shit. And I will be the first one to tell you, as somebody who has regularly used to go to AA meetings and stuff, there is nothing more irritating than being in an AA meeting when somebody shows up who is court ordered, or any kind of group counseling session and it's court ordered. You can size these people up by their body language and the way they act within the first 30 seconds of them being there. And usually these people are really pissed off that they're there. You get a lot of these, especially alcoholics, who think that they don't have a problem, so they're smarter than everybody. And they're so smart that they're going to just derail everyone else. Like, they always believe that they're going to do like a Goodwill Hunting speech, like what's his name, Matt Damon in the bar, where he talks down to the couple of graduate students to prove how smart him and his townie buddies are. I hate that movie. That movie's so fucking stupid. It's so fucking stupid. But they always imagine that they're going to have this epic speech. And what always ends up happening is, like, there's the door. You don't have to be here. If you don't want to be here, don't be here. But you're not going to just derail people and be an asshole. And of course, a lot of the dumb ones immediately leave, and then they find out that they just violated, like, a court order. Because it's like, yeah, the court order says you have to go to the meetings. But if you decide to just disrupt them and you get kicked out, well, you really haven't gone to the meeting now, have you? Not according to the court's eyes. So way to fuck that up, kind of thing. I don't know. I really don't know. I expect a lot of people to run into what Greg's running into. I think Greg ultimately will be fine as long as he doesn't lose his disability payments and shit. Because if he loses those, I don't know what you expect somebody like Greg to do. He has no life skills. He has no coping skills whatsoever. I'm fairly certain the level of his drinking, he's to the point that he can't go cold turkey. Like, I firmly believe that if Greg were to try to go cold turkey, that in itself would probably kill him. Um, this is a guy that barely knows how to use a computer. This is a guy that can't operate a car. Um, I'm not even sure what he did in the military. So, and even if he had any kind of skills that could translate over, they've regressed to such a point that, like, I mean, Greg can barely feed himself. I'm surprised that he's still fucking alive. And this is a guy that's, let's see, 6 years out. He did a year and a half. So you're talking about somebody who's like in their late 20s, maybe 30 at the latest. And if you had me and him standing next to each other, and you were to guess which one of us was older, you would immediately assume that it's Greg. That's how bad he is. Like, his face is all covered in the and the busted blood vessels and stuff. You try to talk to him, and from like all the smoking and shit that he does, he sounds like he's like, oh, at least to me through my hearing aids, he sounds like he's in his 50s. He sounds like a 50-year old wet brain drunk. So I don't know. I don't have to deal with him anymore. And I'll be honest with you, Greg's one of the guys that like if he tries calling me again, I'm just gonna keep him blocked. Like I'm just not. I don't have to deal with him. Like, and the whole reason that I would try to deal with Greg, hey, one, I'm a stupid, hopeless optimist, I guess. But two, if I didn't deal with Greg, somebody else would try to have to. And again, Greg could say all kinds of off the wall shit and it doesn't bother me. But for normal people, dealing with Greg was very, very difficult. Like Greg would all the time would try to say offensive shit to like rile me up. And it's like, it's not gonna work, dude. Like my dad smashed my teeth out when I was a kid. There's nothing you could say to me. This, like, come on, man. I was like, you think you're gonna be able to get under my skin? I have a hole in my face. Come on. Oh my lord. So, yep, I think a lot of people are gonna be in Greg's shoes. But hey, this is what America wants. So that's what we're gonna get. You're probably gonna see a lot of people like Greg roaming around like zombies, panhandling and shit in the next 4 years. It is what it is. And I don't really think anybody should like feel super bad for Greg because unlike a lot of people, as a veteran, he is a protected class, and he's had a lot more opportunities to go into treatment, go into therapy. He could go into treatment tomorrow if he wanted to. If he went into treatment, he would have to go into detox. Let's be honest. He definitely has to do like a medically monitored detox situation. But if he was willing to turn his shit around, he could. But the thing is, for somebody like Greg, it was the same issue with me when I went through detox and rehab. Is you get very comfortable with your coping mechanism, even a destructive coping mechanism. It's a very effective coping mechanism. Like if your life is stressed out right now, you feel like you're getting pulled. It's tax season and so on. Your kids are pulling you in all different directions. Your job sucks. You're underwater with your bills and stuff. Get a heroin habit. Like if you want to really find a way to really focus on something, get a heroin habit. Now all of a sudden you are laser focused in the most important thing: scoring your next hit. And for like somebody like Greg, it's the same thing that I ran into when I was in treatment. That's really when I started realizing that I had to start acknowledging and dealing with my issues. Like I couldn't just keep. I don't want. I say that I fake emotions and stuff, but like what I was doing back then was like really unhealthy, and I started having to recognize my own tendencies and forcing myself to do stuff that I just didn't want to do, wasn't comfortable with. It's only through the grace of God and the love and support of my wife that I didn't end up putting a bullet in my mouth a long time ago. Or well, actually, I was always one of the risk takers, so it was more like I probably would have ended up in prison for killing somebody in a bar fight or just getting stabbed or shot or whatever in an argument. Like I was very difficult to deal with, even though I was a successful field engineer and so on. I was one of the most dangerous type of alcoholics there is, a functioning alcoholic. Whereas like somebody like Greg, I don't think he has any human interactions. I don't know if Greg has any family that's still alive. I don't think he knows. Like because his drinking took off at the age of 18 and it just didn't stop. Which again leads me to believe that Greg probably has a brutal and traumatic childhood. I don't think Greg, as a 9-year old, Saul that planned that his 30s, in his late 20s, early 30s, he was gonna be like this. So it is what it is. And again, big thing is if you're in a situation like Greg where you're finding out that your entitlements stuff are being cut, there's no point in flipping out on the person that's delivering that message because it's a call being made that that person probably has no say in. So on that note, I got to figure out why my remote access is not working back to my lab because I'm supposed to be able to remote in right now. And of course, I try to contact our IT department and I'm getting the message that they're all out of the office because it's after hours. And it's like, well, guys, maybe if you guys could actually not fuck up our network, that would be great. Then I wouldn't have to send off these emails. Hopefully they get back to me soon. They probably won't. They probably won't get back to me till Monday, which is really gonna fuck me. But it's IT department. They're like that. Anyway, I hope everyone's doing well. Y'all take care of each other. Ciao.